Greetings, everyone. This is Families of Virtue, and I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And today we're talking about contentment in the family. And so I want to begin this morning with a verse, and I'm going to do Philippians 4:11 and 12. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. And that's from the ESV. So as we begin and we talk about contentment in the family, this conversation can take on it can go in a myriad of directions. And so overall, you guys, what does the idea of being content with your family mean?
I think we sometimes get focused on what we don't have or the alternative choices that we had made where, like, my wife and I, we waited several years before having children. So she sometimes thinks, well, if we'd started having children earlier, we'd have more children. And I almost try to remind her, it doesn't mean that we would be happier if you have these different changes. There needs to be this sense of just enjoying what you have, where you are. That we have, in our situation, we have 3 boys. People would often ask me, have you ever thought about trying for a girl? And I said, we did. We named them Joel, Levi, Ezra. So, we have these, it would be nice to have children, or have girls, but we don't. And we need to rejoice in what we have, focus on that, and not lose sight of that. And I think that's what really being content with your family means, is rejoicing in that, enjoying those things, without being apathetic, because again, no family's perfect. So I think sometimes we're like, oh, I just wish, my boys, I wish they would clean their rooms more, and we do, but we work towards that. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy them now as they are. It doesn't mean I can't enjoy them in the midst as they're learning how to be functioning human beings. So I think this is something families need to hear, that it's okay where you are and who you have, and if you don't have as many kids as everyone else, or you waited later, or you had them early. I have some friends actually who again, they became empty nesters very, very early, and they think, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Maybe enjoy the blessings you have. Yeah. Don't look past those. So
yeah, one of the things that because I'm the one that actually had children early. My wife and I got married, and we got pregnant on our honeymoon. So we just jumped from the frying pan into the fire. And so we were married, and 9 months later, now we're parents. So we kind of just jumped into it. And there's times like I look back on my life, and I'm like, well, what would our lives be like if we had that time of being a married couple and doing the things we want to do? But then we look at our son, and we're like, I'm so happy that God worked these things out. And we weren't believers at that time. So there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of looking at what other people have and what other people are doing, and then comparing ourselves. And I think even in the church, because we think that a lot of times we escape a lot of these worldly concerns when we're in our church, but sometimes they're breeding grounds for these types of discontentment. For instance, we have in my church now, we have a lot of young families. So there's a lot of new babies coming in, and every time we have a new baby or another person gets pregnant, my wife's like, can we have another? And I'm like,
got that baby fever.
Yeah, the baby fever
that's real.
Spreads.
That's real.
Yep, exactly.
That's real, for sure. So you guys just kind of, you guys are speaking to me right now, because I was a grandfather before I was 40. So that was one of those moments you're like, holy cow, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
But the idea of being content and just accepting the blessings that He has laid upon me. Oftentimes when we talk about contentment and we talk about this idea, it can sometimes sound like you're just supposed to be happy with what you got and where you are. Mm-hmm. So how does the idea of contentment come with a pursuit of holiness still, and a pursuit of a godly family, and pursuit of what He ultimately has in store for us?
I think that aspect of love we have in the family, we have for a family, we can recognize the brokenness. We can recognize, like, if I look at my spouse and look at myself, we're not who and what we should be. But I often tell my wife in particular, I said, I'm not loving her because she does these things well. I do love the things that she does well. I appreciate those things and I express that gratitude, but that doesn't make me love her more. And if she does not do or does not, it's going to sound terrible to say it this way, but if my expectations are not met in whatever field between, housework, whatever it is, that doesn't make me love her less. There's that sense of contentment that I have this blessing of this wife, I have these children, and there is that vision of I want her to be the person God has redeemed her to be. I want her to be in that sense the person that Jesus has in mind. So that's why I love having her, but also helping her reach that.
Yeah.
You do the same thing with the kids. Like you see where they are, you have this trajectory, but I think we need to. The idea of contentment is living in that moment, receiving that versus living for tomorrow. That I think we have a bad habit in our society of always looking towards the horizon and always searching for that. And so we'll lose that, or we'll and the church and the American homeschool community can be this way too, where when we were doing the homeschool gatherings, people would often joke that, I tell them, I have 3 kids, and they would say, "Oh, you're a starter family," and that you would pull up the homeschool convention, and they have like these 15 passenger vans are just all parked next to each other. You realize, no, these are family wagons here, and you look at that, and I look at these larger families, and there's an aspect where I don't devalue that. It's easy to say, "Oh, but I can't imagine laundry in their house." And but then you look and you realize, man, they have so many children, so many different things. You look at that and you're like, this is the place God has blessed them. This is what they have. Let me rejoice with them in their family. Mm-hmm. But I have my family for whatever advantages and challenges it poses. This is my area, and that makes it special. That makes it more significant for me than what anyone else has. Yep. And to have that mindset of presently loving my family as they are and loving them to help them grow to be the people that God is growing them into, whether they're adults, even my kids as they become adults. The idea that I just don't just drop them and run off. It's not like, that you're okay, you're an adult now, kick them out and good luck, But we have to have that sense of wherever they are in life and wherever you are, having that true commitment, because sometimes, or commitment, the contentment, because sometimes things can be really difficult when you're dealing with the teenage years.
Ooh,
and then
no joke.
Then all of a sudden a switch flips and you're just like, what has happened? If you don't have that contentment, it's going to be really easy to try to see past the teen you have and just, okay, we just got to get past this phase, just past this phase. They need you now in that phase and to love them and for them to know they are loved.
And so that's interesting because you have loving them in that phase, but it's also so often that we as parents look at other people's kids.
Yep.
We as fathers look at other fathers. Not we as mothers, but mothers look at other mothers and they see these perfect lives that are presented to the world and they get very caught up in wanting that. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with having role models, but what do you think about the idea of the comparison between you and these other families?
Well, I think it's not... There's a benefit. I mean, we're brought together as a church and we can see other people and there's certain guiding principles that we live by. And I think it's important that we have people that give us advice and people that we trust that can kind of speak truth into our lives, but not with the idea that we're going to be one-to-one comparison between my family and another family. We're going to have differences. We're going to have, literally our children are reproductions of me and my wife, and me and my wife have certain issues and certain qualities and other things and that other people don't have. We're just different people, and we're going to our children are going to be different for that reason. And I think a lot of this lack of contentment, if we're doing it in comparison with other people, is also this lack of gratitude. And I think there is a correlation between those two things, because we're always thinking about what can I, how can I achieve what they have? Well, how can I be, I think if I go and I jump this hoop and I do this thing or go do this sort of like set of things that I need to do, whether it be school, whether I get a certain job, whether, you have a certain amount of children, that I will be happy. I will jump over that hurdle and I'll be there. And I think as Thomas was mentioning, like we so lose track of the present time, and we don't show gratitude to God for what we have at the present moment.
But I think to speak to the need for role models and that issue, I think this is where parents can fall into that discontentment,
Yeah.
or they're not content with themselves. Like in my case, like I know who I am, I know my skills, I know my giftings. So when I have another dad who is a superior at the barbecue grill or the braai, depending upon the way you go about that, and that's not my skill set. I've never been trained and I could probably learn. I just never have. But I'm also content knowing the skills I do have. I know what God has gifted with me, and I know what I can pass on to my children. But I also know that if I want my son to know how to work on cars, he's going to need a role model. He's going to need somebody he can follow. And if I'm discontent with myself, I'm going to be insecure, and I'll even actually hurt my family in that, because I want to keep them away. I don't want them to see, and I don't want them to think less of me. But I have that sense of content with myself, and so with my family. So I know that my family is bettered by these other people who have these skills, who have these abilities. So I want them to have that, and I also don't need to forget, as a dad, my own role models. Like I need people that I can emulate, that I can learn from, because there's a sense my kids, when they watch me and they see that I'm learning from somebody, that shows them almost how to do it themselves. Right. That shows them the value, and even when I'm doing something that's hard, that's very important too. The kids need to see the parents who understand their own limitations and who can rejoice with the fact, okay, God did not wire me this way, but I'm going to try again. There's only so many. There's more animals out there to burn on the grill, so you can just keep going, keep trying, showing them that and showing them it's okay.
Well, I mean, Scripture tells us that the older women in the church are supposed to teach the younger women in the church, and we have the Great Commission of making disciples, which we have a lot of conversations about discipleship amongst us. Kind of what you're describing, though, is this idea of discipleship, and you started out with, I need to be content with my giftings, but then you followed with, I need to broaden and better myself, both spiritually, and it even sounds like with some of the practical things that we do in this world. Do you think that, first off, what would you call that pursuit? And then how do you think that affects the family as a whole? If you as the father or the mother, in the same vein, the parent, each parent, how does it affect the family as a whole with being content, yet still having that element of drive?
I think it goes back to the broader notion of virtue. As we want to become virtuous, we want to become like Christ. That's what it means, putting on that image of Christ. Now, we're never going to do that perfectly. And even as it relates to our various virtues, and we'll even use, being able to grill out a good steak, that is a skill. So that goes into the realm of virtue. That's something someone knows how to do well. Now, if I don't have those virtues, I do know the virtues I do have, and I can. There's a sense of contentment, and particularly with skills, I don't need every skill, and there's certain traits that make me more like Christ. Like as I want to grow in humility, and I want to grow in my modesty, as I want to grow just in my honesty, being able to tell the truth and not just speak the truth, but to speak it with love. So as I want to grow in all these areas, there's an element of recognizing where you are in that journey, and in that sense of gratitude, being thankful, I have reached this stage in my journey, but in anticipation that the best has not yet come. Yeah. And I think that's really that sense that keeps us from being, that keeps us from stalling out. It keeps us from becoming, well, that's just where I am and I'm not going to move. There's an anticipation of growing even further in Christ. But and again, in the language of virtue, if we're so focused and so anxious about growing, we're going to miss the joy of where we are.
Yeah.
You've got to have that balance.
Especially with children that are growing up really quickly. We mentioned that before. They just, we don't, we tend to look so far into the future. And I think that's where, if you have anxiety or discontentment, is probably caused by a little bit of looking too far into the future, in the realm of unknown. Like only God knows the future. And I also think that as we are talking about contentment, we're talking about we're all three of us are fathers here, and what does it mean to be a father, and how do we distinguish between like what some of these qualities, like being a grill master, does that make you a father? Do you need that to equip you as a father? Do you need to be able to work on a car, change a transmission? Do you need to be able to drive a motorcycle or something like that? Like in reality, and I think what we're trying, whatever you are, like whatever qualities that you have in the realm of your family, and because these are the qualities that are going to be passed on to your children that are growing up rapidly. We misunderstand the fact that being a father isn't just these accidental qualities. You can call them that. They're not these kind of activities that we do. It's about the quality of who you are in the home and what you're displaying to your children. Because if you're so concerned about the next thing, or you're looking over through your window to your neighbor's yard and constantly being like, that's what your children are going to see. And I thought about this a lot, and I'm going through the book of Genesis with my teenagers in my church. And one of the things that you see expressed as Abraham passes down to Isaac and Isaac to Jacob, and you talk about the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, and what Abraham was able to portray to Isaac was who he believed in. And it got passed on, and it got successfully passed on to Isaac, who was able to display that to Jacob. And that's why that mantra that they talk about in Scripture, they always go back to those three patriarchs, and they're like, they were able to have a personal relationship with God, and they established that in their home, and then they passed that on to the next family. And if you read the Scripture, they're like, Abraham's not acting like any of the people. He's actually acting contrary to what the world around him is doing. He's following God's what God is leading him in that way, and you see the progress of his maturation over the many years, and then he passes that on successfully to his son. And that, because that's what I think. Like, if you were to ask my son after I pass away, who was the God of Thomas? Like, who's the God? Was it, football? Or was it something that I like to do? Or is it cars? Or was it actually the God of this universe? Was that who I was serving this whole time? And kids can really easily pick this up.
So what I really like. It's interesting what you said, because I like to grill and I like to ride motorcycles and I like to build things. And
well, you're the real man.
That's the point. So what about being a father is not about this false identity of masculinity that we've established in these cultures of men eat meat and men, we have nice stripes in our grass because that's for some reason a weird thing that we take pride in, or that I'm the guy that's in negative, 5-degree weather at a football game with my shirt off and a chest painted. I mean, I know, weirdly specific. But other than that, so it's not this idea of this false masculinity, but you said it's this quality, basically a quality of character.
Yes.
And what that quality of character and how you're placing that and instilling that on our children. I know we're men, and I know, in culture we're not supposed to speak for women, but how does that then same thing equate over to the mothers? How does that same concept of this false idea of masculinity but quality of character, how does that then go over to the moms?
I think it's their particulars are different, but I think it stems from the same place. And I think that's why they'll look, and this is what happens with the young teenage girls. They're discontent with their bodies. They're discontent with their hair. Somebody I saw just this week, somebody had made a comment about women just seem generally unhappy that, if they're born a blonde, they change it to dark. If they're born dark, they change it to blonde. They change the color of their nails. They do all this. It stems from this idea. I'm just not happy with who and what I am many times. And that's not to say that if you do your hair nice that you're a discontent person. It's to find that virtuous middle ground, that place where you just rejoice. And there is a good sense in, wishing to present yourself well, but then you go into the family, and then again, in the case of the women, like I know with my wife, am I being the good mother? Have I done the right things? And she looks at like what other moms are doing, and the other moms are just so happy and cheery, and she's just like, I'm just not like that mom. And I'm like, I don't even want you to be that mom. And I don't even think those moms are real. Like, I think with what you're seeing with that portrayal, it's not real.
But some of them may
and
be.
Some of them might be. I mean, some of them might be.
It's easy on social media to portray your family any way you want. Like, you have the control, and I think a lot of this discontentment can stem from a kind of steady diet of social media, just scrolling and seeing these happy family photos.
And the vacations they go on, and the meals they eat, and the houses they live in.
And they make sure that they display every little thing that they're doing. And, and it's all those extra things that, because it's like the idea too is the motivation. It's like, I have a wife, and she likes to get her hair done. She likes to do her nails and stuff. But she does it because it just makes her, she just enjoys it. Like,
I just want to put this out there.
I think
for the women that are listening, none of us believe femininity is about hairs and nails. Good night, guys.
I'm just an easy concrete example.
No. So none of us believe that. I just want to make sure that we are all clear.
Correct.
That is not what femininity is, and we don't think that that's what it is.
Well, I'll say,
I'm not going to let you keep saying it.
What I'm saying is like that sort of thing, and like what we're talking about is the idea that, like, what are you doing it for? Like, what is the reasoning? What's the motivating factor? And this goes for men too.
So let's broaden it out then. When the ladies are looking, and whatever it is that they're seeing that seems better, that's being presented in social media, there is that sense they get of discontentment. Right. There is that sense of, did I do something wrong? Have I messed up? Yeah. What if I were just this way? What if I just had this? That's what breeds that sense of what I have is not good enough. Mm-hmm. And it's whether it's men or women, it's the same thing.
Right.
Like I said, it takes different forms. For some people, it could be from the physical. For some people, it could be from the emotional. It could be just from, again, if you have a child and they have any kind of special needs, and you start looking at that, and you're like, you start thinking, am I good enough for them? Am I doing everything I can? And you end up creating this situation of discontentment, that you're not rejoicing in who you are and what you have. And I think to kind of sum it up for both men and women, it's a matter of living for today with an eye on the future. And that's that balance that This family you have today, this is what you should rejoice in. Yeah. This is what you should take heart in. And even when they mess up and they do something or they break something, this has happened at my house a lot recently, and it's easy to get caught up in the, oh, now I got to fix this, I got to replace that. And it's okay to say, well, this is going to make interesting memories. This is the kind of thing we'll talk about later, and to recognize there's just a phase, and to love them through that, to enjoy them through that. Because what I've recognized now with our youngest, who is becoming quite a bit more independent, I realize, I remember that, I think that's what sparked this whole thing. I remember thinking, I can't wait till this child can just bathe themselves. I don't have to be involved, and I don't have to do these things. And now that he's reached this point in several different areas, all of a sudden, I tried to pick him up the other day. I was like, I want to carry you. And I know you're looking at me.
Now that's just weird.
Yeah. Well, I did, but there was that element of, all of a sudden I realized he's too big to carry now.
Yeah. So
these things are gone.
So the entire concept of contentment is something that I've been studying on recently, and not recently, but I guess it's been the past couple of years, and implementing it into my own life. I have really learned to enjoy the moment, as you keep saying, and enjoy the location of where I am. And it's actually even pushed me away from things that I once found pleasure in quite a bit. And so I think that if the families that are listening, if they apply this to all aspects of parenting and just life in general, knowing how to be brought low and knowing how to abound, I think this is one of the ways especially one of the more practical ways that we as families can really start to change the dynamic amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you guys. It's been great conversation as usual. And I want to thank everyone that's listening. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com, and we hope to hear from you.